Hi everyone, welcome back to Picked at Dawn's YouTube channel. We've been having absolutely glorious weather and today I feel like I've held off for as long as I can, and today we're going to be looking at one of the most popular focal flowers of mid to late summer, and that is dahlias. Dahlias are a half-hardy plant, and depending on where you live and what your soil conditions are like, you may or may not be able to leave them in the ground with hope that they come back the following year. As I've touched on many occasions, here I'm on heavy clay and the soil gets really waterlogged and cool during winter, so I have no option but to lift my tubers over winter. Whereas if you were growing on sandier soil or in a slightly warmer climate, a lot of people get away with leaving their dahlia tubers in the ground over winter and just applying a mulch. And as the soil warms, they'll come back and they'll start shooting out like these are here. If you're new to growing dahlias, you can buy dahlias in a few different forms. So you can either buy a tuber, which is the roots from the previous year's growth, and you'll see them in garden centres, and lots of online retailers sell them at the beginning of the year. If you buy a tuber, then there's no great hurry to start it in January. In fact, I'd actively recommend that you don't start your tubers in January. If you're just wanting to buy a tuber and plant it straight into the ground, then you won't be able to put them in the ground until the soil warms, and that'll vary depending on where you are and what your climate's like. So in front of me here I've got a few different scenarios of dahlias. We're going to look now at different ways in which I tackle the dahlias. So these guys here in the big pots are my dahlia tubers that I lifted last year. So you can see the previous year's growth there on the dahlias, which was cut back in autumn after the frost had hit them, and then we lifted these tubers in early November last year. We knock off as much soil as we possibly can and put them into crates and store them in a garage over winter where they're not going to get frost and there's not a huge fluctuation in temperature and humidity levels. And then in February, the tubers were all potted into various size pots and started off in a warm greenhouse environment where the frost wasn't going to hit. And then you get lots of early growth. Now, we don't want early growth so that we can plant the tubers out earlier. What we're looking for on early growth on these is so that we can start to take cuttings from them in spring. And then these cuttings will be the next generation of dahlias, which will flower this year. And then these tubers, which have had a couple of years, would become the grandparent stock. And I tend to, at that stage, either split the tubers up or discard the tubers. Because the older the tubers get, the more lazy they become. And then, believe it or not, they start to produce less flowers. So by taking cuttings and splitting and dividing your tubers, you're actually reinvigorating the plant so that it'll produce more flowers. Firstly, on this video, we're going to deal with how I take my dahlia cuttings. What we're actually interested in is these little stems down here. And if you can see there, when I planted the dahlia tubers, I've exposed a bit of the tuber at the top because that makes it easier to take the cutting from. Now this stem here is what I'm going to take a cutting from. I've removed the tuber from the pot just so it's easier to show on camera how I'm going to take the cutting. Now it's still thinner than a pencil, so we know it's not going to be a hollow stem. And it's about 10 centimetres long with a couple of sets of leaves, which makes fabulous cutting material. So if you notice with my knife, I'm placing down into the tuber. I'm not placing across like that because what I'm going to try and do is nick a little bit of that parent tuber with this cutting. So I'm going to get the stem and I'm cutting away into that parent tuber as well. Now that is really lucky. That's actually taken a little mini tuber of its own. They won't all produce like that, but that will definitely root because you can see it's already got a bit of tuber attached to it. So that has sprouted from what's called an eye on the top of a tuber. And it's all the eyes that actually create the stems of growth. So that there is a good healthy cutting. I'll show you as I take some more that they won't all be like that, but they will all root. That's a perfect one there. That's really what you want to be looking for. So if you notice, I've just sliced a little bit of the parent tuber off, and then I've got a good bit of stem there as well with a couple of sets of leaves on it. Now I've gathered all my dahlia cuttings, it's time to prep them for the next stage and potting them on. So if you look at one of our dahlia cuttings that I've taken here, the perfect one, we've nicked a little bit of the tuber there, and we've got leaves, one set of leaves, two set of leaves, three sets of leaves coming up. Now the likelihood is that this one, because it's got a little bit of tuber on the bottom of it, will shoot roots from that tuber. But if you didn't have that, it would be shooting from the leaf joints, because what we're going to do now is, using our knife, we're going to remove the leaves from the stem. And we're just going to leave that actual tip on the cutting there. Now it's from these leaf joints that you would get rooting, because what we've done is removed the leaves, and the plant is going to want to repair that damage. So it's going to try and grow another leaf. But because that's beneath the compost line, when I put it into its compost, it won't be able to grow leaves because they won't be able to photosynthesize. So instead, the hormones in that plant material will tell it to produce roots, and that's how the dahlia cuttings root. So I'm just going to clean up all these cuttings, ready for the next stage. Now that one, we don't really have to do anything to it. I'll remove these leaves just so we're not putting too much stress on that stem in terms of moisture that it's got to retain. But that's obviously got a nice fat root to start shooting away from, so we don't have to worry too much about that one. And that one I'll just pot into its own 9cm pot straight away. So that is a 3-litre pot, and I am going to fill it with some peat-free, nice loose compost up to that point. Now the reason I'm filling it up to that point is because then what I do is sink a 1-litre pot inside the 3-litre pot, and then I put compost around the outside of that pot. If you plonk them right into the middle of a 3-litre pot like this, they're a lot more likely to rot. Whereas if you have them around the outside of the pot gets warmer, and water drains easier down through the outside of the pot than it does through the middle of the pot. So they're less likely to rot. So that's what we've got now. And what we do then is knife, dibber, pencil, anything. Just make sure you're pre-creating a hole, and then place your cutting in. And we're placing the cutting in up to that leaf joint there. You have to give your cuttings a really good drink. I'll place this pot under a see-through storage box somewhere out of direct sunlight, so as not to stress the plant material again. And then, if you saw on one of my previous videos, I did the same thing with chrysanthemum cuttings. The reason that we put the pot in the middle of there is not only to aid rooting and save compost, it means that when you get excited and you want to check on your cuttings, you can remove the pot and see if they've rooted. And then in about 4 weeks' time, your dahlias should have rooted like these chrysanth cuttings here. And it's at that point that you pot them into 9cm to 1-litre pots to grow on. And then when the risk of frost is gone, you can plant them outside. Now dahlias are also available in seed form. I've been really lucky this season, and I'm working on a collaboration with Philippa from Just Dahlias. She's based down in Cheshire, and as you can probably tell by her company name, she specialises in dahlias. She's an absolutely brilliant dahlia grower, and she grows the most beautiful varieties. And recently she's started gathering seed. From that seed, she's beginning to produce an absolutely stunning range of dahlias, which are exclusive to Philippa and Just Dahlias. Now in February, she sent me over some of that seed. The seed was gathered from 3 parent flowers, which are seedlings that have been produced by Philippa. Philippa gathered the seed from those plants at the back end of last year, and then in February she sent some of that seed up to me. And then in mid-March I began to start to sow that seed. I sowed some seed in an open cell tray and put it on a heat mat where it had constant levels of humidity and heat. So from this scenario that we've developed here, I am now going to prick all those seedlings out because they've developed true leaves, and I'm going to pot them into cell trays. When we're looking at these Dahlia seedlings, what we've been waiting for is for the plants to start producing their true leaves, which are these ones here, rather than their seed leaves. And that gives an indication that it's time to start pricking them out and potting them on. Now what I do is just remove a clump of seedlings, you can see there, and then gently start to tease them away. Try and tease using your fingers on the leaves rather than the stems and the roots, and you'll see that they come apart quite nicely there. The key is to water your seed tray before you start to do this, so that the plant doesn't go into shock, and the compost should be fairly moist, allowing you to not tear at the roots when you separate the seedlings. I'm imagining it's going to probably take about another 2 weeks for these plants to root into this cell tray, at which point I'm going to keep some for myself. I will send some to Philippa, and then we're going to release the rest of them for sale online as plug plants. Now they should be along a similar genetic trait to the parents, but because they've been open pollinated, they're also expecting to see some beautiful surprises. So what's the difference between growing a dahlia that has been produced from cuttings or has been grown from a tuber, or by growing dahlias from seed? Well, these little dahlias here from seed have been produced from open pollinating seed. So that means that all the flowers that Philippa has collected the seed from have been open to each other, and she grows numerous varieties. So anything that has pollinated one flower and then gone to another flower, that's called cross-pollination. And that's where you get the differences in the flowers. Also, it'll be from that plant's genetic history, so wherever along the line it's been bred from. One thing I learned from Philippa was that the dominant gene in dahlias is actually yellow. So if you're growing yellow dahlias and lots of other colours, and then you collect the seed from lots of other colours, you might find that if they've been crossed with a yellow dahlia, the seed from a pink dahlia might end up producing yellow dahlias in the end. I actually find this kind of geeky stuff quite exciting, and I hope you find it interesting as well. So in terms of open pollinated seed, and I'm not just talking about dahlias here, any open pollinated seed, you can never be 100% certain that you're going to get the parent flower again the following year, because it could have been cross-pollinated. If you definitely want a certain variety of dahlia tuber, you are safest buying the tuber, and then from that tuber producing cuttings. It's more of the variety that you like, because you're taking plant material from the parent tuber. You know you're going to reproduce exactly the same plant. You want to be sure you need the dahlia tubers, and if you want exciting times, you need the seedlings of the dahlias. Or you can do what I'm doing, which is growing a mix, and then you can be sure you've got your varieties you definitely want, and then you might find some absolutely stunning new seedlings coming through from the open pollinated seed. There we go, that's the end of the video. However you're dealing with your dahlias, whether you're potting tubers, taking cuttings, or sowing seeds, I wish you the best of luck with it. Let me know in the comments how you start off your dahlias and some of your favourite varieties, and I'll see you next week. Bye!